Welcome to the Freak Show, fellow freaks.
I am Matthew Brockmeyer.
And I'm Christa Carmen.
And this is
Murder Coaster.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Today we bring you a sad tale of punk rock defiance, laid low by a conformist in a Cadillac, and how the verdict of a town without pity shocked the world. It is in some ways a story uniquely American, the jocks versus the outsiders, but in other ways as ancient as the death of Socrates, executed for teaching the youth to think for themselves and refusing to worship the old gods. It is the story of Brian Deneke and the death of Sunshine.
Let's begin. Prologue. The Freaks versus the White Hats and the death of Sunshine. To folks who didn't know him and didn't understand the subculture he was involved in, Brian Deneke could look scary. He had a spiked blue mohawk, tattoos, combat boots, a heavy chain dangling from his waist, and a leather jacket with a patch reading "Destroy Everything" on the back, a reference to a song by his favorite band, Filth. But the truth is, anyone who ever took the time to talk to him described him as friendly and sweet, with a contagious smile and a congenial glint to his eye. He was known for going up to the new kids at punk shows, introducing himself and welcoming them to the scene, making them feel safe and secure, telling them they were all one big family. In fact, his nickname was Sunshine.
It was a bitterly cold night on December 12, 1997, in Amarillo, Texas, when Brian Deneke, his brother Jason, and their punker friends John King, Jackie Balderas, Chris Oles, and Jennifer Hicks decided to head out to the International House of Pancakes on Western Street, the main drag of fast food joints and convenience stores that cut through town, where all the teenagers hung out.
Brian and his friends knew trouble was waiting for them at the IHOP, but it was a boring night and there was nothing else to do. Besides, they were tired of being bullied, jumped, and pushed around.
If it wasn't drunk rednecks, it was the White Hats, the jocks from the local high school, called White Hats because they wore white baseball hats with the names of colleges with top-ranked football teams on them, like Notre Dame and Michigan.
The White Hats would spit on them, call them freaks and homophobic slurs, slam them against lockers, hurl bottles at them from their pickup trucks, jump them in the bathroom, punch them, kick them, and laugh at them. For Brian Deneke, the bullying had been so bad that he'd been beaten to the point that he had to get stitches, then called fist magnet, and eventually just dropped out of high school to escape the abuse. All because of the music he listened to and the way he dressed.
Just a week earlier, there'd been an incident in the IHOP parking lot when one of the White Hats, a pudgy little troublemaker named Dustin, tried to hit them with his car and got his windshield smashed for the trouble. Now the jocks were swearing vengeance and saying there was going to be a fight, a big fight, a rumble.
Sure enough, when the punk rockers pulled up to the IHOP, a large group of jocks in varsity jackets and white hats stood outside, at least 20 of them, along with dozens of other high school students who had gathered just to watch it all go down.
There were less than a dozen punks total, and 4 of them were girls.
Nothing new. The punks were always vastly outnumbered. That's why they'd taken to carrying what they called equalizers, weapons like police batons and pepper spray. Brian Deneke had what he called a smiley, a chain with a padlock attached to one end. Called a smiley because the imprint the lock left looked like a smiley face.
We've talked about before in other punk rock episodes. We've done a lot of them now. Often kids who liked that music and fell into that lifestyle had no choice but to learn how to fight, as assholes would jump them just because of the way they looked. I've heard this stated countless times, from Ian MacKaye to Henry Rollins to Mike Ness. Some formed gangs to protect themselves, some took to carrying weapons.
The IHOP manager, Mark Kelly, says, quote,
"The punks were right by the door, and the jocks had them surrounded in a half circle, saying, 'Come on, fight, come fight us.'"
The manager told them to break it up and get going, so all the jocks motored across the street to an empty shopping center parking lot. Sitting under the streetlights, dozens of them, hooting and hollering and egging on the small handful of punks who stood in the IHOP parking lot across the street.
As has been pointed out by many journalists, it was like something right out of an S.E. Hinton novel, The Outsiders or Rumblefish, and they were very right. It was an old-fashioned rumble gearing up to go down.
For Brian Deneke, the taunts were too much. He was done with being bullied, demeaned, spit on, hit, an object of ridicule, scorn, and derision. He wasn't going to take it anymore, despite being vastly outnumbered. No, he was fighting back this time. He had a scene to defend. He couldn't let the jocks win this war. So he whipped off the chain dangling from his belt loops, his smiley, and just like Matt Dillon playing Dallas Watson in Francis Ford Coppola's version of The Outsiders, he bolted across the street, running headlong into the sea of white hats, swinging his chain, quickly followed by his brother Jason and their punker friends.
As anarchy and chaos descended on the parking lot, fists, chains, and clubs flying, it was very much like the rumble scene in that movie. The leather-clad greasers duking it out with the preppies in their Letterman jackets, when suddenly there was the rumble of a car engine and an old Cadillac, the same car that had started all the trouble to begin with the week before, came tearing through the melee, weaving through the crowd, headed towards punker Chris Holes, clipping him, the punker rolling up over the hood and off, quickly getting to his feet.
The Cadillac beelined toward the exit, then made a sudden jerk and turned around, and headed back into the melee, this time toward mohawked Brian Deneke, a happy-go-lucky punk everyone called Sunshine.
Brian turned toward the headlights, a look of absolute horror on his face as the bumper slammed into him, pulling him under the 2-ton vehicle. First the front tires thumping over his chest and face, then the back, before the car jumped the median and lurched out onto Western Street and onto the highway, old Route 66, disappearing into the cold Texas Panhandle night.
The white hats cheered happily, victorious, and then scattered.
19-year-old Brian Deneke, whom everyone called Sunshine, lay in a bloody patch of snow against the median, his arms askew, his left shoulder torn out of the socket, and his collarbone ripped free and exposed, his mohawk flopped over to the side. His front teeth were broken, and a deep gash ran down the left side of his face. Blood poured from his mouth, nose, face, and shoulder, pooling around his broken body.
The 2-ton Cadillac had crushed Brian's skull and chest.
His brother Jason ran to him, falling to the ground and wrapping his arms around him, hoping to administer first aid as Sunshine spit up blood, tried to garble something from his broken teeth, and then went still. And then Brian Deneke died in his brother's arms.
In the morning, police would go to the owner of the Cadillac's parents' house. The owner being a 17-year-old junior varsity football player named Dustin Camp. They found him sleeping soundly in bed, his car splashed with blood, a nearly empty bottle of Crown Royal whiskey in the back beside an 18-pack of Bud Light with 13 missing beers, and arrested him.
The 2 other passengers in the car that night, fellow football player Rob Mansfield and class valedictorian Elsie Thompson, who, to their credit, immediately called police afterwards, would both confirm that Dustin had hit Brian Deneke on purpose and that he'd laughed about it, calling himself a ninja with his caddy.
An investigation confirmed there were no skid marks, no sign that Dustin had attempted to brake or slow down, and there were 2 other incidents of him using his car as a weapon against the punks. Clear-cut case of cold-blooded murder, right?
You'd think so. But the hatred of the punks by the establishment would continue into the courtroom. Instead of the murderer being put on trial, the dead victim was instead tried, and his life was judged to see if it was worthy.
It was no longer a story of murder against a defenseless victim solely because of the way he looked, but now a tale of a dangerous social outcast and anarchist who got what was coming to him.
And the verdict would shock and sicken the world, leaving the world to wonder, what the fuck was wrong with Amarillo, Texas, where listening to punk rock music and having a mohawk made it okay to be murdered?
And the world would also wonder, who was this punk rocker Brian Deneke, whom everyone called Sunshine?
Chapter 1, Little Brian.
Brian Theodore Deneke was born March 9, 1978, in Wichita, Kansas, to parents Mike and Betty.
He had a brother named Jason, who was 2 years older than him, and though they were very different in many ways, the two would have an incredibly close relationship and be the best of friends.
Brian's dad, Mike, was a large, congenial guy, very Midwestern, wearing plaid shirts and favoring suspenders over a belt, who sold stainless steel cookware. It was a very stable, very happy, and loving home, and when Brian was just 3 years old in the winter of 1981, Mike was transferred by his job, and the family up and moved south to Amarillo, Texas.
Amarillo, which means yellow in Spanish, is named after the wildflowers and yellow soil of the dusty Texas panhandle where it is situated. It's the most populous city in the region, surrounded by barbed wire cattle ranches that stretch as far as the eye can see, out towards Oklahoma to the east and New Mexico to the west.
Interstate 40, formerly known as the famous Route 66, cuts right through the city, and Amarillo is known for the big Texan restaurant's 72-ounce steak challenge, which draws in tourists and celebrities alike to see if they can consume 4.5 pounds of beef.
I'd try it. I don't know.
Sounds terrible.
It depends on the cut. I know that you don't eat meat, but...
I know, I don't know why I'm even chiming in on this conversation. Even if I did eat meat, that sounds like so much food. It's like a break in your stomach.
4.5 pounds of salmon.
Crazy, yeah. Well, what?
The city is also known for the Pantex plant, the primary assembly and disassembly plant of nuclear weapons in the United States, earning the place the name Bomb City.
The Denekes settled into a suburban neighborhood on the southwest side of town, amongst a sea of cookie-cutter houses with American flags and basketball hoops. Out front was a bed of gardenias, and in the backyard a mulberry tree with a tree house where Brian and Jason would happily play as children.
While Mike continued selling stainless steel cookware and Betty got a job as a manager at a photo processing lab and took to collecting painted enamel butterflies.
Very wholesome. The FM radio played country music and evangelical preachers urging sinners to find Jesus and bathe in the blood of the Lamb.
One local would say it was like the 1950s had never ended. The newspaper would actually print letters to the editor advocating the return of school prayer and the teaching of creationism instead of Darwinism.
Conformism was the rule. Everyone was expected to fit in and do as they were told. As another local stated, it was considered radical to turn your jeans up only once at the cuff, instead of twice like everybody else.
While Brian's older brother Jason could be a bit stern and serious, Brian was a happy-go-lucky kid, friendly and smiley.
And while Jason was a bit introverted and wanted nothing more than to stay home and read, Brian was gregarious and extroverted, a people person. He was an active Cub Scout, then Boy Scout, and went to Paramount Terrace Elementary.
But while a social butterfly of sorts as a child, Brian was still an outsider, as he had no interest in sports whatsoever. And as his brother Jason would later say, here, if you're not an athlete, if you're not part of that culture, you're nothing.
Still, all was perfectly suburban, happy and wholesome, and all American. That is, until older brother Jason discovered that dreaded and horrible toy that brought anarchy and chaos to many a suburban home in the 1980s. The skateboard.
Chapter 2, A Tale of Two Brothers.
When Brian was 13 and his brother 15, skateboarding came into their lives. It was Jason who introduced Brian to it, but it was Brian who became a true blue skater boy. Really random aside, my daughter is super into the song Skater Boy by Avril Lavigne.
Nice.
Do you even know that song?
Of course I do.
Okay, you gave me this blank stare. I was like, oh no, I'm not like barking up the wrong pop culture tree right now. You usually know everything.
There's this ridiculous joke that Avril Lavigne started punk rock and was the original punk rocker. I don't know if you've ever heard it.
Oh my god, that's funny. I was like showing my daughter some videos of like, you know, she's like almost 6. She's like interested in music and musicians, and I was like, oh, this is Avril Lavigne, this thing, and I like couldn't get over the wife beater with the big pants with the boxers hanging out and the tie. I was like, oh my god. Early 2000s.
All the smeared eye makeup.
Time. Yep. Actually, another fun random fact for you. Avril Lavigne is the one celebrity that I have been said to look like more than any other celebrity that I've ever gotten in my life. Probably not right now, but I used to have long blonde hair. I got Avril Lavigne a lot.
Well, Brian and Jason started building homemade skateboard ramps in their backyard, quarter pipes and launch ramps, even launching over a car at one point.
Although it was all perfectly innocent, just two all-American brothers trying to have fun in the suburbs, skateboards are inherently trouble-causing. They're loud, dangerous-looking, and can be kind of obnoxious. And in conformist Amarillo, they immediately landed Brian in hot water.
When Brian brought his beloved skateboard to a Boy Scout meeting, the Scoutmaster grabbed it out of his hands and hurled it out the door.
Brian, rightfully pissed off, the things aren't cheap, called him a son of a bitch and said he didn't need his stupid troop.
And so Brian quit the Boy Scouts, and the rebellion began. Because with skateboarding came a whole new culture and lifestyle, rife with fast, angry music that would change both brothers' lives forever.
Magazines like Thrasher from San Francisco were going out to 7-Elevens and skate shops in small towns across America at the time, bringing not only the fashion and style of skateboarding, but punk rock music as well.
Yep, skateboarding was the catalyst for many a punk rocker, myself included. And Brian was no different. There's just nothing like skating to the beat of Black Flag and Suicidal Tendencies. It amped you up, made everything so much more fun and alive. Skate and destroy.
Punk bands had actually been stopping in Amarillo for a while at that point, as it was right on old Route 66, Interstate 40, which was a natural stopping point on the way to California. Amarillo was literally known as the halfway point from Chicago to LA, which is why the legendary first-wave punk band The Clash had played there way back in 1982.
So though small, and in many ways still fledgling, there was a definite underground punk scene for the two brothers to fall into.
An old-school Amarillo punk scenester, David Poindexter, recalls,
"When punk came here in the early 80s, it was exhilarating. The energy was tremendous. You danced until sweat poured off you, until you were too exhausted to stand. It felt like something was finally happening here."
So Brian and his brother Jason started going to punk shows at the local club The Egg, and were soon wrapped up in the scene. But here they took different paths.
Jason embraced the working class pride ethic of the skinheads in the scene. And just in case you're under the stereotypes of the media, no, traditional skinheads are not racists or Nazis. The movement actually started with Black Jamaican immigrants who brought the rude boy culture to England in the 60s and 70s.
So Jason joined the Bomb City Skins and adopted the conservative working class look. Shaved head, neatly pegged pants, Doc Martens, and suspenders. What's known as boots and braces. And a spotless Fred Perry polo shirt. Looking sharp and clean.
But Brian dove into the dirty, grungy punk rock look. Battered old combat boots, a dog collar around his neck, and a leather jacket with spikes and band names scrawled on it. Baggy, ripped-up camouflage pants, red plaid flannel shirt tied around his waist. First, he just put a green streak through his hair. Then, he shaved off the sides into a mohawk, which he began growing out and spiking it with gelatin, eventually dyeing his streak of Liberty-spiked hair bright blue, a style which would become his signature look.
But his parents, Mike and Betty, were not down with this at all. They were old-fashioned Kansas-bred folks with strong middle-class values, and their son running amok on a skateboard with his hair shaved into a blue-spiked mohawk frankly mortified them. It was just beyond their scope of understanding, and there were constant arguments. At one point, they even attempted to hold Brian down and cut his mohawk off.
Of course, this is the last thing you want to do. It will only make a kid rebel more, which he did. And his parents, who were loving, they eventually just accepted it. As Mike would later say, he had a real strong opinion that it shouldn't matter how he had his hair, how he dressed. And even though he was right in a theoretical sense, it didn't matter. We knew that society would judge him and there would be consequences. But we thought that if we didn't accept him, we would lose him. You get to the point where you can keep battling with your children, but you realize you're not going to change them.
And the truth was, Brian Deneke honestly loved punk rock, felt it in his bones, loved everything it stood for, the independence and anti-authoritarianism, the anger at a hypocritical and conformist society. He'd write letters to his favorite bands, the Subhumans, Naked Aggression, Blanks 77, Logical Nonsense, telling them how much he loved them and asking them to come to Amarillo and play. And they would. Often Brian would help them book shows, distribute flyers, and find them somewhere to sleep. True blue punk rock.
But while Brian found acceptance and love in the punk scene, his life in high school was sadly much, much different. The conformist kids at Amarillo High, where jocks were royalty and preppies were the cool kids, relentlessly bullied Brian. And the jocks had a wicked reputation for being incredibly cruel. And it was actually a culture of cruelty that was fostered and fomented.
The biggest day of every year was when the rival football teams, the Amarillo Sandies and the Tascosa Rebels, would play each other. And the week leading up to the game was called Hell Week, a time when the football team would amp themselves up to a state of utter frenzy. They'd paintball their opponents' trucks and set off firecrackers on their lawns, egg houses and string trees with toilet paper, and get into fistfights around town.
And all of this was absolutely encouraged. There'd be pep rallies, led by a squad called the Fanatics. And the football players would beat up and stomp dummies, dressed as the opposing team.
So in a state of hyper-aggression, it's no wonder that the macho football players would pick on the strange-looking kid with blue hair. He was spit on in the hallway, slammed against lockers, beat up so many times they started calling him Punch and Fist Magnet.
For the most part, he'd just grin and bear it, laugh in their faces, take the abuse.
Future girlfriend Jennifer Hicks stated, quote, "People tried to start fights with him wherever he went. When people drove past him, they flipped him off or ran their mouth, calling him a freak or a faggot or a worthless piece of trash. He'd smile and say things like, "Oh, you're such a big man."
As Brian skateboarded to and from school, they'd throw bottles at him, jump him. Once he was beaten so badly, he had to get stitches.
As his father would later say,
he took a lot of verbal and physical abuse from people.
Eventually, it got to be too much, and at 17, Brian had enough, so he quit school and went and got his GED instead.
Yeah, fuck Amarillo High. I so feel this shit. I was a skater with a mohawk in high school and also got endlessly bullied. But it wasn't the football team. Those guys were actually cool with me. I sold them weed. It was the wrestlers. For some reason, the wrestling team at my high school just had it in for us punks and would always seek us out and start trouble. It fucking sucked. They made our life hell. I'm still pissed. So yeah, if any of you wrestlers from Delaney High School are listening, fuck you.
Yeah, fuck you. Chapter 3. Jennifer Hicks.
Brian moved out of his parents' house and into an apartment above the local punk club, The Egg, washing dishes at the Catfish Shack to get by. He formed a band called White Slave Trade that he sang for, started getting tattoos, fully immersing himself into the local punk scene and becoming a fixture.
And then he started hanging out with an old friend named Jennifer Hicks, the two becoming a couple.
Jennifer and Brian had grown up near each other, but they were both known as the rowdy wild childs of the neighborhood. They'd get into egg fights when they were bored, throwing eggs at each other, which is actually a new one to me.
Jennifer says about Brian, he was real cute. He was. He had a really positive, outgoing personality. Instead of sitting on his ass, he'd rather do something. He was real fun.
Jennifer was a troubled girl, constantly running away, getting into trouble. She'd spent time in a detention center and a work camp. But it was this wild side that attracted Brian to her. She had bleached blonde hair, shaved on the sides, and tinted pink on the edges. Multiple rings through her lips and nose. An outsider, a nonconformist, punk as could be, which Brian obviously loved.
Brian became the central person in Jennifer's life, supporting her when he could, and together they decided to go live the real crust punk life, get out of Texas, run away and explore the world. They started hitchhiking east, bringing a stray dog along with them, determined to check out the squatter scene in New York City.
To me, this is just incredibly romantic. These Texas panhandle kids, him with a spiked blue mohawk, her with a bleached blonde Chelsea, a mangy old dog on a leash of tied together shoestrings, hitchhiking into the sunset, to see the world. It's maybe kind of a shame they missed Grateful Dead tour, which really catered to that lifestyle, and there was a lot of crust punks there amongst the hippies.
They'd go to truck stops and clean the 18-wheelers for money, hop freight trains to random towns, dumpster dive for food, surviving on the garbage fast food restaurants and grocery stores throughout.
For months, they roamed the country together, gutter punks, exploring the world. Sometimes they'd spare change. Sometimes they'd collect cans and bottles to recycle, following in the path and tradition of the American subcultures before them, the beats and the hippies, seeing the world, following the road, living communally in squats, making music, finding friends, searching for the secret, looking for the sound, stumbling down the street like dingle-duties, for the only people for them were the mad ones. The ones mad to live, mad to talk, desirous of everything at the same time. The ones who never yawn or say a commonplace thing, but burn, burn, burn like fabulous yellow Roman candles exploding like spiders across the stars.
When they got back to Texas, they were bona fide crust punks, the real deal.
They helped form a communal space there in Amarillo where punks and freaks could come and crash, find a community and family, get something to eat, a place they called the 8th Street House.
It was a rundown hovel covered in graffiti in an overgrown, weedy lot near the center of town, with cheap wood paneling inside covered with flyers for old punk shows and lit with a few fluorescent bulbs hung with chains. The electricity illegally wired into the house with jumper cables. Furniture was all cast-offs they found on the street.
Gutter punks would squat there when they were passing through town, writing things like, "Break free from oppression," and "Smash government corruption" on the walls. In Jennifer's room, a small sign said, "Be warned, the nature of your oppression is the aesthetic of our anger."
And Brian even found a really cool job with local artist and notorious prankster, Stanley Marsh III.
Been huffing diesel and a sniffing glue. I got a stone cold baby for tiramisu. I want your love and your liquid body and a spanking new can of a WD-40. Get down.
Stanley was famous for his Cadillac Ranch, a roadside attraction and tourist trap, celebrating the evolution of Cadillac tail fins.
Basically, the Cadillac Ranch is just 10 old Cadillac cars buried nose first in the sand, just their rear ends poking up, inclining at the same angle as the Great Pyramids of Giza in Egypt, covered in day-glow paint.
It's actually really cool looking. I'd definitely go there if I was passing through. And now Stanley was working on a new art project, which he called the Dynamite Museum, which consisted of hundreds of mock road signs painted with whimsical slogans like, "Revenge will never solve anything, but karma will," and "The days run away like wild horses over the hills," and "The road never ends."
It was basically a freak show, and Brian thrived in the weirdness, driving around town in a pink 1959 Cadillac and a yellow hearse, with a pig named Cinderella, Stanley wearing a top hat and spouting absurd poetry as they put up all these weird road signs.
Yeah, I gotta admit, that sounds fun as hell.
Stanley would have Brian go door to door asking folks if he could put one of their weird signs in their yard. As Stanley explains about Brian,
Well, he looked bizarre, But he could walk toward people with his hand out, grinning, and they would like him before he even got to their front door. So I called him Sunshine. He was boisterous, optimistic, fun. So, Sunshine. And it just stuck.
Brian became a hero and ambassador of the Amarillo punk rock community, bringing bands to town and making the 8th Street House a refuge for kids who had nowhere else to go, providing them with food and a place to sleep. As Bomb City Skin Brady Clark says,
Brian's main goal, and he had saved a whole lot of money for it, was to start an all-ages place for bands, poetry, art, theater. He wanted to have a place where kids could hang out, be in their own element, and not get harassed by a bunch of drunk rednecks. He wanted to give everyone something constructive to do with their free time.
At just 19 years old, Brian Deneke had lived 100 lives already, sang in a band, hitchhiked across the country, lived in New York City squats, formed an anarchist collective, and despite his young age, had become an elder in the Amarillo punk scene, a role he used for good. He was a ray of light, literally sunshine.
When Brian saw a new face at a show, he'd go and talk to them, often for hours, making them feel welcome and part of the punk scene.
Water in a river never stays the same place. Like a rock, I'll sit here, I'll let time flow away. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going anywhere. Every now and then I'll just skip across the water, leaving little ripples only where I so do bother. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going anywhere I don't want to be. I'm not going anywhere I can't be me. I'm not going anywhere there's no sunshine. I'm not going anywhere you say's divine. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going anywhere.
An old-school Amarillo punker, Dan Kelso, would say,
Brian was the candle burning the fastest and brightest. People gravitated toward him. He was the face of the scene here. He was visible, smiling, standing tall. When he was killed, part of these kids died too.
Don't you dare.
Chapter 4, Dustin Camp.
They'll say they came and saved us, and then they'll say they came to keep the peace. They'll say it to civilians with a shot left to die in the street. Or see. They'll say they came to set them free. Results are always guaranteed. Nothing but lies and hypocrisy.
Amarillo High School football player Dustin Camp was in many ways the poser that punks sought not to be. Really a pathetic wannabe. He wanted desperately to fit in, to be part of the cool crowd, but he wasn't cool. He wanted to be part of the rich preppies, but he wasn't rich. He wanted to be a jock and star athlete, but he couldn't even make the varsity team.
Dustin Camp was solidly middle class. His parents ran an auto mechanic shop where he'd work to make pocket money, but he wanted to be part of the elite upper-class preppies that were the cool kids at Amarillo High.
Now, his parents did live In the fancy Wolflin Village, the older neighborhood of stately homes, well-tended lawns, and brick-paved streets, where the elite families of Amarillo have lived for generations. But they lived right on the edge, just a block away from the lower-class part of town.
He wanted to be a jock, but he was short and baby-faced, despite going to the gym and working out, eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches between meals to bulk up, which only made him chubby.
Looking at pictures of him, he looks like a child in his football shoulder pads, tiny round head poking up, much smaller than the rest of his teammates.
By the 11th grade, all his friends were on the varsity football team, but he was still on the junior team. Obviously a disappointment to his parents, who went to every game and would sound an air horn when he came onto the field.
So obnoxious. Unable to excel as a jock, he took to being the class clown, to try to make friends with the in crowd. As his friend Jesse Sierra says,
he used to joke around in class a lot and make everybody crack up. At dances, he danced real wild.
Even though he was on the junior team, didn't have that varsity leather jacket that he so coveted, he'd still sit with the varsity team at lunch and trade wisecracks with them in the weight room, trying so hard to be the cool, rich, preppy jock, though the truth was he was a sad wannabe douchebag who couldn't even dance.
It's interesting to compare him with the Deneke brothers. Jason, who embraced his working class roots and became a skinhead, and Brian, who embraced his outsider status and became a punk. They strove to be authentic and true to themselves. Dustin strove to be something he wasn't, denying both his working class roots and outsider status. He was a literal poser, pretending.
And perhaps it's because of this that he hated the alternative subculture that had bubbled up in Amarillo. The skins, goths, punks, and crusties that went to the hardcore shows at the Egg and hung out at the 8th Street House. The freaks that went around putting up fake road signs. Some of them went to his high school, and he'd see them hanging out at the IHOP. He hated them even more than the other jocks did, perhaps fueled by the knowledge that deep down, he was more like them than the preppy white hats he aspired to fraternize with.
So even though Dustin didn't even know these crazy-looking punks, had never talked to them, he wanted desperately to fight them. But he was a chicken shit wannabe. He didn't have the courage to take them on with his fists, so in the end, he'd use his car as the weapon. A 15-year-old 2-ton Cadillac.
Chapter 5. The International House of Pancakes.
Woke up face down on the bathroom floor. Said it was the last time but lied once more. Black lungs and bloodshot eyes. One more round, another rowdy boy. I smashed some bottles and I smashed my mind. One more round and I'm dead inside. Till the devil calling, he knows my name. He's got me on a ball and chain. Let's go another round. It's gonna put me in the ground. He punched out the mirror, 'cause I hate what I say. I said I won't the kid that I used.
It all started on December 6th, 1997, at the IHOP on Western Street. It was a quiet night. No bands were in town, the holidays were ramping up, Christmas music everywhere, and it was brutally cold. So Brian and his friends, Chris Oles and John King, in total punk rock fashion, were hanging out at the 24-hour diner, drinking coffee and smoking cigarettes.
Yep, hanging out at the old 24 diner, smoking cigarettes and drinking coffee. When Chris Oles, this gangly punker all in black, went to the bathroom, he had to pass a table where a bunch of the high school football players were hanging out, including Dustin Camp, who, remember, was only on the junior team, but was hanging out with all the varsity guys. So, to impress them and show them what a big man he was, he starts hurling insults at Chris, calling him a freak and gay slurs. Of course, all the gay slurs. So stupid and weird.
So when Chris gets back to the table, he starts blowing kisses at him, egging him on, fucking with him. Basically, being punk rock.
So Dustin, I guess his manhood now in question that this punk rocker's blowing kisses at him, gets up and threatens him. And then John King stands up. And Dustin jabs his finger into John King's chest. And John King was one of those punk rockers that you did not fuck with. And here's the thing. These guys, they didn't even know each other. This wannabe jock is putting his finger in this hardcore gutter punk's chest, getting all in his face, and he doesn't know him. He has no idea who the hell he's fucking with, what this guy's been through.
John King was ready to fight and gave Dustin a shove that sent him sprawling across the diner. And Brian and Chris knew there was going to be trouble, so they grabbed their friend, pulling him away before an all-out brawl broke out right inside the IHOP.
Yeah, you don't want to fuck up your scene. The IHOP was their hangout. They were friends with the manager. If they got kicked out of there, where else are they going to chill on a cold winter night?
And at the same time, the other football players are grabbing dumbass Dustin and hustling him outside as well.
When Brian and his friends got outside, Dustin was already in his Cadillac. And of course, they flipped him off, started calling him a fucking wanker. Punks love giving the finger. So Dustin guns his engine, puts the Cadillac in gear, hops over a median, and comes straight at them. As witness, Kendra Petite recalls,
I'll never know how they moved. It all happened so fast. They had to jump out of the way. He was trying to hit them. He had it floored. His tires were screeching.
But as we said, John King did not fuck around. He'd been jumped by assholes before, they all had. And not pudgy high school jocks, but mean drunk rednecks. And the punks and skins had all taken to carrying weapons to defend themselves. So, as the Cadillac lurched over the median or raced towards him, John King whipped out a retractable police baton. And as he leapt out of the way, he brought that baton down against the windshield, shattering it.
Dustin Camp sped off as he was a scared little baby, but he vowed vengeance and swore they were going to settle it all with a fight, a rumble between the white hats and the freaks.
Chapter 6, The Rumble.
It was Friday night, December 12th, 1997, a week after the incident at the IHOP, that 16-year-old Elsie Thompson somehow ended up in the back seat of Dustin Camp's Cadillac.
Elsie was a good girl, a year younger than Dustin, an all-A student at Toscaso High School, who went to church and Bible study, and who'd eventually graduate as valedictorian.
Elsie was hanging out with her former boyfriend, Rob Mansfield, varsity tight end on the football team, the Rebels, that night. They'd gone house hopping, cruising from house party to house party. Elsie, who didn't drink, mostly just talked to her friends while the boys chugged beers, slapping each other on the back, screaming and being obnoxious as hell.
Everyone was talking about the big fight, the rumble that was going to go down at the IHOP between the freaks, those weird punk and goth kids, and the white hats, the preppy jock football players. But Elsie didn't pay it much mind. She just thought it was all talk, as a lot of these fights were. It was so boring in Amarillo. There was often nothing else to do but sit around and talk smack.
At some point, Elsie and Rob ended up in Dustin Camp's Cadillac, and as the night progressed, it now being after 11 o'clock, with nothing to do, they ended up at the all-night IHOP, as did every other preppy kid from Tascosa High. There were upwards of 50 or more of them, inside and out. The parking lot was so full, Dustin had to park his Cadillac next door.
Meanwhile, Brian Deneke, a.k.a. Sunshine, and his punker buddies were at the 8th Street house drinking Guinnesses, their favorite beer. They too, like the Toscaso High kids, were bored. Nothing to do, nowhere to go, so they went to IHOP.
Brian's buddy, Jackie Valderez, would later say, "It was kind of stupid to go there, but we'd all been drinking and stuff."
Elsie, the sweet, good girl, I guess she'd be Cherry in The Outsiders, was sitting inside the IHOP with her friends, being social, when her ex-boyfriend Rob strutted in and coldly announced, "We're leaving." When they stepped outside into the parking lot, there was an argument going on. As Elsie would say,
To my left, there's 2 or 3 of the punk people, for lack of a better word. There was this one punk guy who was really, really tall and scary looking, and he's holding up one of those police sticks, and he's yelling at the group of people I knew in the parking lot.
the one with the police baton was John King, the punk who didn't fuck around, and who readily admits he had a baton that night, and that he'd handed Chris Oles a baseball bat, as they were completely outnumbered and surrounded, a fact which would be reiterated and backed up by the manager, who said 20 or more jocks had the handful of punks cornered.
Elsie could feel the tension and wanted nothing to do with any of it, and when Rob told her to get in the car, she felt relieved, happy they were going to get away from the fracas, as the manager was now outside telling everyone to break it up and get moving.
But instead of driving away, Dustin drove across the street to the Western Plaza Shopping Center parking lot, where the crowd was now streaming, the white hats taunting the punks and daring them to come fight.
And then all hell broke loose, as one of the punks, a wild-eyed guy with a spiked blue mohawk, yep, old Sunshine himself, Brian Deneke, came tearing across the street, swinging a chain, followed by a group of his friends, and a full-on rumble broke out.
According to the punks, the jocks quickly swarmed them, particularly Brian, stomping him to the ground where he curled up in a fetal position. But, according to the jocks, the punks, even though they were outnumbered by at least 3-to-1 minimum, were somehow able to swarm the jocks and overpower them, which, and I must point out, I was not there, I don't know, but it seems absolutely ridiculous. 8 punk rockers versus an entire football team? and they managed to somehow gang up on the football players? Bullshit.
Elsie would later say, quote, "By now the fighting is in full force. There are just tons of people. Everyone's going crazy. I mean, I'd never seen anything like that. To me, it just looked like this mass confusion of people just running after each other."
And that was when chicken shit Dustin Camp, who never even got out of his vehicle, decided to use his car as a weapon, hitting the gas and aiming towards Chris Oles, who was battling it out with Dustin's friend, Andrew McCullough.
Dustin managed to clip Chris, who rolled up onto the hood with a surprised look on his face, then slid off and back onto his feet.
Rob, sitting beside Dustin, had had enough and urged his friend to leave, yelling at him to get the hell out of there. And Dustin gunned his Cadillac toward the exit, but then, on a sudden impulse, jerked the wheel and swung the big Cadillac back around and toward the fighting, towards the guy with the chain and the blue mohawk. As Elsie would later say,
I realized, oh my gosh, we're heading directly for a human being.
She says she remembers a frozen moment in time where Brian locked eyes with her. On his face, a look of absolute terror as Dustin Camp took aim with his car, muttering, "I'm a ninja with my caddy." And then the soft, sickening thunk of impact, the terrified face slipping beneath the bumper, and the thump as the wheels passed over him. "I bet he like that," Dustin said.
Elsie says, quote, "Dustin was heading for the highway. And from that moment we hit him till we got on the highway, it was complete silence. It seemed like forever. And then I started freaking out, rocking back and forth and stuff and just covering my face. Then I just started saying, oh my God, over and over again. And then I was praying, I was crying out to God, oh my God, help me, please. And then I sat up and leaned into the front seat and they were completely silent sitting there. I said, what if he's dead? And no one said anything."
When Dustin Camp's Cadillac slammed into Brian Deneke, pulling him under, crushing him, all the jocks cheered happily, then leapt into their cars and began peeling away.
Jason ran to his brother, knelt down to where he lay, and cradled him in his arms as his friends gathered in a circle. As John King would later say,
"He was saying something, but I don't think anybody understood it. There was all of us surrounding him, and Jason was holding him in his lap. There was blood everywhere. It's tons of blood."
Jennifer Hicks says of that moment, her true love lay dying on the street. It felt like I was in a movie or something, like it was fake. Blood was coming out of every hole in his head. He got squished. There was blood from his nose, ears, and mouth. All these Christian people were saying prayers, and I said, man, he's fucking dead. He's dead, he's dead, he's dead.
Brian's mother, Betty, was putting decorations on the Christmas tree when she received a phone call from Jason to come to the Western Plaza. He wouldn't say why.
When Betty arrived and saw the blood and the sheet-covered body, she knew. She didn't have to ask. She knew what they'd done to her son.
Chapter 7. The Graduation Ceremony.
Some kind of morning feels like the sun never set. Some kind
driving Elsie and Rob home that night, after purposely running over Brian Deneke and killing him, then laughing about it, Dustin Camp finally admitted he'd made a mistake and told them he'd take the fall.
Arriving at their homes, both Rob and Elsie immediately woke up their parents. Within minutes, the two families, who lived across the street from each other, were talking on the phone, and together, they escorted their children to the downtown police station, where both of the teenagers gave statements.
Dustin Camp, on the other hand, simply parked his car in the driveway, stumbled drunkenly inside, and mumbled to his parents that he'd run over a punk rock freak. They told him to just get some rest and they'd worry about it in the morning. So he shambled off to his bedroom and went to pass out.
At 6 a.m. on December 13th, Amarillo police pulled up to the home of 17-year-old high school jock Dustin Camp and arrested him for the murder of Brian Deneke. He told them it was an accident. Oh, he hadn't meant to hit him at all. The car, it just slid on the ice. He wasn't just a pathetic wannabe stone-cold murderer. He was a bold-faced liar as well.
Search warrant in hand, police seized the tan-colored 1983 Cadillac and examined it. On the hood were dents and gashes. On the car's undercarriage, they found splattered blood.
An affidavit shows that police took as evidence 10 swabbings of blood, 2 hairs or fibers, bits of paint, and from the trunk, an almost empty bottle of Crown Royal whiskey and an 18-pack of Bud Light with 13 missing cans.
Meanwhile, the punk scene was absolutely devastated at the loss of their mentor and friend. Jennifer saying, "I stayed drunk for a long time. There would be cases of beer in our house every night."
In true tribal fashion, they gathered mementos of their fallen comrade. Some attached bits of Jason's bloody jeans to their leather jackets. Others, including Jennifer, tattooed Jason's name into their flesh so that they'd never forget. They printed up t-shirts with Brian's face against a field of orange flames with the words, "Brian Deneke, hate kills." Another reading, "Punk angel, will you be mine?"
Good girl Elsie Thompson, the Cherry Valance of the story, couldn't sleep, was tormented with guilty nightmares where she brutally murdered the girls in her Bible study. She claims she became so depressed, so immersed in guilt that she had done nothing to stop Brian Deneke's death, that she sat around in dirty pajamas for weeks, refusing to bathe or brush her teeth, saying if Brian could no longer do these mundane activities, then neither could she.
Yeah, but, crusties and gutter punks aren't really well known for bathing, to be honest.
Dustin Camp, meanwhile, was released on bond to await trial and went and finished high school. And disgustingly, when the little wannabe douchebag crossed the stage to receive his diploma, the audience erupted into cheers.
To which I say, fuck all you pieces of shit.
When Elsie gave her valedictorian speech at her graduation ceremony, she countered this, saying in part, "The evening of December 12th, 1997 was the most traumatic and valuable experience of my life. I was a passenger in a car that hit and killed a young man during a fight which took place between two groups of people who wore different types of clothes. On that evening, a boy lost his life, and with him a part of many people died. Nothing else I have experienced has so greatly molded who I am and what I think. I hope its message can penetrate your heart. So I challenge you and me, all of us, to break through the stereotypes with which you may have been raised. I challenge each one of us to see the art, the beauty of humanity in others.
Nice words, but sadly, very few of them would take it to heart. And no, it isn't very pretty what a town without pity can do.
Chapter 8. The Trial in a Town Without Pity. The trial began the last week in August 1999, a swelteringly hot day at the Potter County Courts building.
On the left side of the courtroom were the white hats and khakis and button-down dress shirts. On the right side were Brian's parents, Mike and Betty, and then 3 rows of ragtag punk rockers in boots and tattered band shirts, there to support their fallen hero.
Assistant District Attorney John Coyle stated,
"We believe that the evidence will convince you beyond a reasonable doubt that this was not an accident, that this was not justified, and that the defendant intentionally and knowingly murdered Brian Deneke."
The prosecution then gave evidence that Dustin had never applied his brakes or turned his steering wheel as his Cadillac approached Brian, that he had been drinking, that he had fled the scene of the crime, and he had lied to the police.
Rob Mansfield, tight end of the football team and front seat passenger in Dustin Camp's Cadillac that horrible, horrible night, had conveniently had a psychological break and had blocked out all the details of what happened. So he wasn't able to testify against his friend. Oh, poor guy, so traumatized. You don't think he was just a full of shit coward afraid to get on the stand, do you?
No. So Elsie Thompson would become the prosecution's star witness.
Everyone agreed her credibility was beyond question. She was the class valedictorian, and she was the only eyewitness who hadn't been drinking. And Elsie stated that despite Dustin originally telling police his car had slid on a patch of ice, that she had seen with her own 2 eyes him purposely hitting not just Brian, but Chris Oles earlier as well, and that he had laughed about it, saying, "I'm a ninja with my caddy," and afterwards stated, "I bet he liked that."
But Dustin's defense attorney, Warren Clark, turned the whole trial upside down, admitting his client had purposefully run Brian over, but then put Brian and his punker friends on trial instead.
Warren Clark transformed the murder case into a wholesale condemnation of the punk scene, saying,
Ladies and gentlemen, this is not a case of diversity or tolerance, or judging people by the way they dress. This case is about a gang of young men who chose a lifestyle designed to intimidate those around them, to challenge authority, and to provoke a reaction from others. A conspiracy was put into play to kill and maim these high school students. Dustin had no time to think or ponder. He had to take immediate action, and he took it. And if he had to live it over again, he would do it again. Brian Deneke's manner of death was unfortunately the end result of his choices over the last 6 years prior to his death. You could even argue that he was destined to die the way he did. He was a violent individual, and it took violence on Dustin's part to put an end to further violence. Let this boy go home and restore him to his family, because he did the right thing.
And as for evidence, the defense displayed a photograph of Sunshine with his iconic blue mohawk, then brought out the clothes he wore: camouflage pants, combat boots, and a ratty shirt, holding up his leather jacket, which said "Destroy everything," and stating,
Destroy everything? Is this the message we want to send our children for generations to come? This is what that weapon-wielding goon wore the night of the altercation. Looks to me like he was on a mission to kill.
He failed to mention that Destroy Everything was a reference to a song by Brian's favorite band, Filth, and that the statement was meant to imply destroy stereotypes, destroy preconceptions, destroy hateful mindsets, the same mindsets that had caused his murder.
But the jury ate it up, finding Dustin Camp guilty of manslaughter, not of murder.
And they sentenced Dustin to probation. Yep, not a day of prison time. Just 10 years probation and a $10,000 fine. But don't worry about the fine. Oh no, he didn't have to pay the fine. He wouldn't have to pay that fine if he just stayed out of trouble. Basically, Dustin Camp had gotten away with murder. All he had to do was keep his nose clean for 10 years.
Chapter 9. Afterwards.
Many in Amarillo were shocked and outraged that Dustin Camp had gotten away with murder. The verdict made headlines around the world. MTV covered the case. But despite this, the hardcore punk scene there began to shrivel and die.
Many of the Amarillo punks shaved off their mohawks and began dressing in more normal clothes. Others moved to more punk-friendly places like Austin or Dallas, some heading all the way out to California.
The local punk club, The Egg, closed down, as did the 8th Street House. And to this day, folks there don't want to talk about it, either scared or just wanting to move on and put it behind them. We reached out to so many people while researching this case. Friends of Brian's, his family, most of them ignored us. And the few that responded were too timid to really talk, not wanting to cause waves, which is so sad. It was actually easier getting folks to talk about Sammy Town from Fang dealing acid and murdering his girlfriend Dixie Lee Carney than it was getting people to talk about this innocent kid being run over, which is crazy if you think about it, especially as Brian himself, Old Sunshine, was outspoken, loud. He'd want his story told. And luckily, the story has been told and hasn't died.
In 2000, there was a play written about Brian by David Bucci entitled Manslaughtered that performed in Seattle. And in 2017, a movie was released about Brian's death entitled Bomb City.
It's a good flick, Bomb City, though it seemed a little over the top in my opinion. The characters becoming stereotypes. Still, good flick. And there's been songs, lots of songs, such as Brian's song by The Code,
Tears on a Pillow by The Undead,
Fortunes of War by Dropkick Murphys,
Sunshine Fist Magnet by Against All Authority,
A Punk Killed by Total Chaos,
American Justice is All a Lie by Career Soldiers,
and Sunshine by The Swellers, among many others. And there's been podcasts. We're not the first. I hope we're not the last. The story deserves to be shouted from the rooftops and not forgotten. And Brian's life, as short as it may have been, needs to be celebrated because he was the real deal. He built up his scene, brought in bands to play, offered the other punks food and a place to crash. He headed out into the cities of America like the beatnik freaks before him, making friends, living the life. And he was kind, compassionate, full of life and passion and love.
As for the little wannabe Dustin Camp, well, remember the sign Brian painted for the Dynamite Museum that stated revenge will never solve anything? Karma will? That slogan became very true.
In June of 2001, Dustin was caught drinking and arrested for being a minor in the possession of alcohol. And his father, the same guy who told him, "Don't worry about using your car as a murder weapon to kill a punk rocker," tried to hide the fact that his son was on parole, and he ended up being charged with making false statements to the police.
And Dustin Camp finally received some form of justice, an 8-year prison sentence for violating parole, of which he served 5 years.
And even those 5 years really seemed paltry for extinguishing the bright flame that was sunshine to so many.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, was the story of the murder of Brian Deneke. Thank you so much for listening.
Boy, oh boy, do we got a lot of people to thank today. First, I want to give a big shout out to the Punks Over 50 Facebook group. If you're an old geezer like me and you like punk rock, check it out. I found nearly all these bands there, great people. We have bands from around the world that donated songs. From the UK, we got Zombie Killers, Annie Malfunction, and Angerland from London, Rumbrave from Wales, from New York City, Blackout Shopper, from Costa Mesa, California, Get In Loser, from Los Angeles, Spider, from Alabama, Skeptic, from Asheville, North Carolina, Discs. And we have good friend of the show and favorite, Donkey Cock. From Washington, Busy Beaver, featuring their new single, Amacat, with the legendary Marco Perroni. And from right here in Humboldt County, California, we got local hardcore bands, Something Wicked, and Brain Dead Rejects. There's links in the show notes. I'm going to try to put together a Spotify playlist and put that in there too. Check out these bands. They are fantastic. Thank you so much for listening. We will catch you next week.